Digital 410 Productions proudly presents the What's in Your Head podcast.
Digitized live from the
Your company name here.
studios in Cape Coral, Florida. It's the What's in Your Head podcast.
What's up, OG5? What's going on? It's another episode of the What's in Your Head podcast. Joining us tonight is actor Scott Gibson. And of course, Morgan Long is here. Mike is out for the week, but he should be back next week. We got a good show involved with everybody here. Got a good story I want to tell. But first and foremost, Mr. Scott Gibson, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty well today. It's beautiful weather here in Ottawa, Canada. Not too hot, sunny. We've had a piss load of rain lately.
I can send you more. We got the bands off of that Hurricane Debbie, so it's been raining down here every day. We've had some minor street flooding. The beautiful brickwork on your front porch reminds me of my mom's house in Kentucky. She has that same appearance. That is the worst. That is the worst part about living in Florida. Everything is just shellacked with freaking stucco and paint. Every house looks identical down here. Every once in a while, you'll see somebody who moved down here from north get a wild hair up their ass, and they'll put some siding on their house, and it'll look like Kentucky or Ohio. But then the mold sets in, and a hurricane comes by and yanks it all off, and then they regret it. But other than that, here's the template: cinder block walls, reinforced with rebar. They pour concrete down it. They got to knock a hole in every other rung so the concrete pours out so the inspector can see that there's concrete. All of our roofing has Simpson and Hurricane straps. The horizontal supports on your garage door? All of ours have an extra support for hurricane structure. Everything down here is just built to bomb-proof almost. I'm not surprised enterprising young man hasn't showed the benefits of putting rhino liner on houses, because that would definitely work down here. I remember 5 years ago, there was a Discovery Channel show, and 15 years ago now, it was at the height of the Iraq War. Some of the military bases or buildings that they would take over, civilian buildings they would use for military bases, they would literally spray rhino liner on the outside. It made the damn things bomb-proof. And I was watching a show where they recreated it like in the desert of California. They built a cinder block structure, put rhino liner on it, brought in an EOD guy. He put an IED out. It blew up, and literally you just saw a bubble in the rhino liner. Building didn't collapse at all. Just shit's super tough.
I need that for my career.
I don't know about that. We were talking before you came on. You've been working, not to make you feel bad or old. You've been actively working since I was a sophomore in high school. I graduated in 97. Your first credit's 1995.
Now I feel old.
And you have a project you did in 2024, and I see you also have something in pre-production and mid-production or post-production. So you're actively working, fella.
Yeah, I have a box in the basement, and it's all VHS tapes that I never got transferred. Stuff I did with Gregory Hines, F. Murray Abraham, Judd Hirsch, Bonnie Bedelia, William Hurt, just pre all that stuff days, and here you get a tape of it, and that your demo was on that, and self tapes were on VHS. Remember sending self tapes to? I think I sent a VHS for Band of Brothers.
We'll get to all that here momentarily, but real quick, while we're on subject, did VHS fall under the category of media postage where it only cost you $3? Do you remember?
I think so.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that because books are so heavy that one of the ways that the publishing companies worked out a deal with the United States Postal Service is anything you have that's considered media only costs $3, whether it's 15 books or a CD. Real quick, I just want to bring this up because I gave Morgan some homework over the weekend. I made him listen to this old ICP song. It's basically a recreation of the old folklore of the haunted story where someone gets a phone call and a guy says, "I'm going to come kill you. I'm 6 blocks away," and it gets closer and closer, and they keep calling. Morgan, the reason I had you listen to that song, I had the bizarrest shit happen on Saturday. So I canceled my gym membership and I'm doing a poor man's CrossFit. And I say poor man's CrossFit because a CrossFit membership costs between $150 to $200 a month. And in today's world, who can afford that? So I've been doing it out of my house and up and down my street. And so on the days I'm not running, I have now I got a plate carrier, looks just like a bulletproof vest. I got an 8 3/4 pound plate in the front. It's non-ballistic. It's actually made for running. And I got one in the back, and I've since put another 10 pounds on it, so it's 27.5 pounds. And I'll run a half a mile around my neighborhood, and then I'll come in my garage, and I'll get my sandbag that I made during Hurricane Ian 4 years ago, which used to be 40 pounds. Now it's down to 38. I'll put that on my shoulder with the weighted vest, do another half a mile. Then I'll come back, and I'll grab 2 dumbbells and do farmer's carries, but I'll just go up and down my street. It's a quarter mile. So here's where this comes up. Craziest shit. And it'd be interesting if this is anything close like this has happened to either one of you. So I pull out my driveway and I walk down. I walk about 40, 50 yards, set them down. Of course, they're dumbbells and they're 2 plates pressed together on each side. So it makes that clanking noise, right? It's 10 o'clock at night. Pick them up. By the way, dark. I got a red flashing light on my hat. I got a white flashing LED on the front of my plate carrier. Keep walking, get down the street, clank, stand there, turn around, make my way up to the other end of the neighborhood. At the end of my street, there's a house that sadly, 3 or 4 years ago, the lady who was renting it, her ex-husband came and stabbed her 17 times on Father's Day. I'm guessing she wouldn't let him see the kids, but I don't know. She survived, but don't know really what happened because this isn't the first time I've seen this. My old house, my neighbor got shot in his front yard. Turns out he wasn't selling, but he was moving large quantities of weed out of his house. Someone came and shot him with a .22 long rifle. He was a renter, and the lady who got stabbed was a renter. What happens when this sort of thing happens on a rental property? Believe it or not, the landlord doesn't let you stick around. So she got kicked out. He got kicked out. I say all this to say all that to say this. I get in front of that house and I set the plates down. Clank. I've been working out for an hour, so if either one of you ever done long distance running, you start thinking of weird shit, right? Because it's all time in your head. And so as I'm sitting there catching my breath, I have this weird movie scene in my head. And in this movie scene, there's a little kid in that house who hears the clank coming down the yard. Looks out the window, sees this red light. Here's a clank. And much like the axe killer who's coming to get him, their imagination starts running wild because they hear this clank and they see the lights. They see some crazy guy with a bulletproof vest. They hear clank. He gets closer and closer. And in my mind, they run and tell their parents, there's a guy coming to kill me. He's getting closer. He's getting closer. Parents get annoyed, call the cops. I'm explaining to myself, no, this isn't a bulletproof vest. This is this is a weighted vest. I'm working out. I just have this make-believe scenario in my head. Pick up my weights, walk back down to my house, clank, drop them off. I finish this routine by doing another half-mile run. So I go out, head out my driveway, come up around the corner. I see 2 orange marker lights in front of the house, exactly where I was standing, having this movie scene in my head. And my neighborhood's dark, super dark. The side of town I live in is so dark. And I say to myself, that's a goddamn cop. Walk by, I see the cop walking from the porch. Gets in his car, take out my earbud, roll down the window. Are you looking for anybody? Oh, we just got a welfare check call. We came and found the guy. How crazy is it that I was standing in that spot 8.5 minutes earlier, imagining a conversation I'm having with a cop because some kid's imagination ran wild, and they called the cops. And eight minutes later, I'm talking to a cop in front of the exact same house, except for I'm not the person they're looking for. I don't know if there was weird juju coming off the house that my subconscious picked up on. What the hell is that? It's the weirdest shit ever. If either one of you had anything remotely similar, like where you're thinking, just making up some shit in your head and then something like that that's more than deja vu, right?
Yeah, it sounds like you should be sitting in a 4-cornered room staring at candles.
What the hell was that?
I was 21 visiting my grandmother with my mom in Halifax. And long story short, I'm writing in my journal, looking out the window, and I see my grandfather on the porch. Well, he's the war hero who died 2 years before I was born.
Wow.
And I mean, it was like he was standing out there. And I looked down, I'm like, that can't be. And I looked down at my journal, and there's a hockey game on. I look back up, he's not there. I mean, I had a weird sensation. I've never seen or felt anything like that before. Years later, I tell my mom, or I ask my mom, hey, have you ever seen a ghost or anything? She says, only the one time. You know, my father passed away. I didn't see him in the casket because he car accident and he was burned. And she said, I was in my mother's apartment and I was sitting on the couch and I got this weird sort of sensation. I looked behind me and he was in the mirror.
Wow.
Exact same apartment, exact same couch. Neither one of us have ever had any experience like that in our life.
And that's a little strange too, because usually these type of things, these stories are told from an older house. You know, you very rarely hear of a ghost encounter in an apartment that's, 6 years old. It usually comes from the house that's been in the family for 20 years or what have you. This barn behind me is actually a photo that we got from Lowe's, but it reminds me of the barn that used to be across the street from my grandmother's house. Growing up in Kentucky, speaking of living in old houses, when I was born and then up to like 5, we lived in an old farmhouse that used to belong to my great grandmother from the late 1800s. She died at 99. And sadly at this point, my mom and my dad got divorced. My mom was dating some 19-year-old punk ass. I think she was 23 at the time. Things happen. People get hurt. Shit gets thrown across the room. But anyhow, one night they're having one of these interactions that people don't want to see or hear, especially 5-year-old kids. And he came into my mom's room just ghost white. My mom's like, what's wrong with you? He's like, there's an old lady in your kitchen with a shotgun and overalls. He described to the T my Aunt JD, who passed away like 8 years before. Apparently the domestic got to the point where Aunt JD showed up with a shotgun, like, time for you to get going, fella. So, but
Jeez.
The other crazy thing about that house, because it was so old, when you walked in the front door, you had a staircase, super skinny one. This is long before we had, codes for wheelchairs and large people. So you go up the stairs and it was my sister's bedroom. And then you walked out her bedroom. There's a hall. There's another staircase. And then our bedroom. My mom was out. Dad was somewhere else. It was just me, my brother, and my sister. And we're all in one bedroom. And we just hear boots walking up the stairs. Go look down both stairwells. Nobody. And then I would also hear people saying my name when I was a kid, which my brother asked me years later. He's like, when we were in Richwood, did you ever hear a woman just like, Daddy? Like all the time. But my brother heard his name. It's just the weirdest shit ever. But yeah, weirdest shit ever.
You need another podcast.
Yeah, the weird thing is I don't know if I believe in that sort of stuff or not. How does one go from being a young lad, playing hockey, riding mooses, guzzling syrup? How do you go from Molson and syrup flavored Molson? How do you go from that lifestyle to when did you get bit by the acting bug? Was it in high school? Was it after school? How did the whole acting thing come about?
I always did as a kid. I think just maybe family dynamics and, wanting to be more emotive or kind of out there or play, et cetera, and so forth. And you grow up playing football and basketball and hockey and, not total machismo male figurehead or the brothers or, like not like that. But anyway, I remember being home. I was like 7 years old and I was watching The Great Escape.
Okay.
And I just fell in love with Steve McQueen. I thought, man, that guy is the coolest. And then anytime I was watching movies, I'd be sort of like doing my own stunts and, win the girl, fall over the couch and win the girl. And I was a young kid and everything, just emulating that stuff. And I always enjoyed playing outside and everything. And it was always there. It's just, you get into high school and again, you're playing the sports and you work the job, chase the girl kind of thing. And always wanted to do it. Not till university. I got into the University of Western Ontario, had a small drama program. And I applied and met the teacher, and you didn't have to audition. It was just an interview. And then she's like, well, I'll post a list of who's in the class on the weekend and see it on Monday or whatever. I think I went in on the Sunday, ran up to her office, and I can still remember seeing my name on that list, and I can still like feel the light that was shining through the windows of this, you know, beautiful university arts building. And I don't get too nostalgic about it, and I just thought, this is it. This is my start. I'm just not going to look back. Maybe I should have, finished the degree and got a few other, get a little trade under my belt or something like that. But it never left me. It's not the same now, and you get a bit distanced, from the industry, like, in terms of life or where you are and how much it's changed. We'll get into that later, but.
Well, a lot of kids had that dream. I remember saying make believe, recreating Die Hard by hanging off the back of the couch instead of the roof of the skyscraper and all that stuff. But the problem I always had is I had a learning disability since I was in second grade. So, one, I couldn't read, let alone memorize shit. Little did I know, you could just memorize that scene in between takes. But I always wanted to do it, but I never knew how or where to go. And of course, high school, I was too busy skateboarding to get involved in drama or anything like that. But I know Hollywood has been doing a lot of production in Canada for at least 10, 15 years. Was the production that prevalent back in 95, 96 when you first got started, or did you have to travel down these parts?
Oh, it was way better for us, way better for Canadians. They didn't bring as many U.S. actors up. I don't know, they trusted us more, or it was like back then you were still working with some old school people, right? Like Christopher Plummer, Max von Sydow, all these other great actors that I'd seen growing up, and I'm on a set with them, not necessarily having the biggest role. And most of the stuff was 35 mil or 16, not videotape, right? So everybody, for the most part, theater trained. And actors at that time that would come up here to do TV movies, and these aren't necessarily big time TV movies. I mean, it still happens today, but like to work with, mentioning William Hurt or, Greg Hines and Bonnie, Jenna Rollins, like you're just going, you got to be kidding me. So there were bigger roles for us then, and it just kind of got squeezed. 2001, 9/11 changed things dramatically.
Yeah, travel.
Whereby in the industry, okay, let's bring more of it home. Or the system kind of changed, the film festivals changed, and you just saw sort of less availability for Canadians to be able to get in. Like it would take me the better part of a month to get a visa to go work in the States. It takes an American actor about an hour to get a visa to come here. So it's really, really changed. But I mean, I did a ton of stuff back then. I got out of theater school and it wasn't long before I started working.
Two things. One, I got my first, immigration's been all over the news down here for a while, but I got my first glimpse of how effed up our immigration policies were back in 2003. I moved to California, got my first job working in an IT space, and I was working for this web hosting company. I was 3 years old. It was owned by a guy at the time in his 40s. He was an ex-biker on his third strike. So any sort of trouble with the law, his ass is going to prison for life. And then a 25-year-old from Sweden named Max. And they got the idea to start hosting websites because the owner, back in the day, he was running EverQuest servers. And it was blowing up, so he already had servers. Started hosting websites at $7.95 a month. 3 years later, each one of them's bringing home $80,000 a month after payroll, after everything, after all their taxes are paid. And I remember Max's visa expired, and this was after 9/11, right? So everything's just crouched down. So here's this guy from Sweden. He has to go back to Sweden. He has an American-based company with American employees. He's paying taxes on, I don't even know. I mean, what's California taxes in 2004 when you're making $80,000 a month? So the guy was paying taxes, providing employment, took him 6 months to get his visa renewed to come back to the States to where his business was. It's like, holy shit, if that guy can't get a visa, you know things are effed up. And so that's when I, like, you know, because you don't really understand things until you see it firsthand. And like, I'm just sitting back like, this guy's entire life is fucking here. And, you know, you can't say he's a drain on the system. He's contributing substantially. And if he can't get a visa, forget the guy, you know, the small actor trying to come down here from Canada, pick up a weekend shift, maybe trying to get episode 1 on some soap opera somewhere. So yeah, I can only imagine how long it took you to get some paperwork to get down here.
It was only until the Pacific because you had to have enough credits. I think it's different now. The Australians, you know, God bless them, but they're still allowed in the U.S. lottery for green cards.
Really?
But yeah, I know 5 actors, at least 5 Australian actors, I think, that got just green cards in the lottery. So I mean, you got to go and live there for 6 months of the year. But
you brought up,
you know,
go ahead.
No, just that I couldn't get that, and then the visa situation. When we used to go for pilot season, Canadian actors would mail their pictures and resumes to a friend or agent there, and then when you got to the border, they'd lie about what they were doing because we were so paranoid about getting kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
And you weren't even working, but there were these rumors that, oh, you know, so and so went and said they were an actor, and the most famous actually was Neve Campbell.
Yep.
Because hers, I forget exactly what happened, but she got burnt somehow that way. And then it took her like an exorbitant amount of time and money to get her green card again.
Yeah, I remember Adam Carolla was telling a story. He was going up to somewhere in Canada to do a show, and his agent or his book or somebody said, just tell him you're here for pleasure. Tell him you're here for pleasure. He said, well, I've gone through customs. I'm here for pleasure. Then his assistant goes through and they check his bag and see 43 hard-covered books with his photo and his name on it. Like, here for pleasure, huh? You always bring 43 copies of your book when you're here for pleasure. So, you know, they weren't too happy about him lying. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the charity events I went to was in Milwaukee. With Walk Among Heroes,
mm-hmm.
and I get to the border, and I've said this before. It's like, I'm going to a charity event. What are you doing? And usually it was always a male U.S. Customs here in Ottawa, and you know, they go, oh, what show were you in? I'd say the Pacific, and they're all ex-military, you know, and sometimes Marines are like Semper, and this woman was like, did they pay for your ticket? Are they putting you up? I'm like, yeah, I'm not getting paid. I'm going to the event. And she's like, well, you need to have a visa for that. And I said, excuse me? She's, yeah, because that is considered income. And I'm like, I'm not getting the money.
Yeah, they're putting me up at a guy's house, not at a hotel. I'm staying at somebody's couch in his living room.
And she, I don't know if she was looking me up on her computer,
mm-hmm.
maybe, but she paused it out for a bit because she was literally not going to let me go. And she said, you have to get a visa for this from now on. I'm like, okay, but in my head, I'm going, I'll never say I'm doing that again. Whether they recognize me. Thank you very much, but I'm not, hey, charity company, pay me $30,000 or to get my visa. Like,
I'm going on a fishing charter in Minnesota.
Exactly.
Going to go catch me some sockeye.
So you were listing off some of the people that you had the opportunity to work with. Was there somebody or multiple somebodies where you had to control yourself from completely geeking out and being a fanboy?
Kind of like Jeff does when you come around.
Who?
So kind of like Jeff does when you come around.
Yeah. You know, I mentioned that Christopher Plummer story because I did the miniseries Nuremberg, and I work with Brian Cox.
Is that the kind of thinking it takes to carry out state-sanctioned mass murder? Not just blind obedience, but also a belief that your victims are not human.
Let me ask you this. What was Hiroshima? Was it not your medical experiment? Would Americans have dropped bombs as easily on Germany as it did upon Japan, killing as many civilians as possible?
And he intimidated the hell out of me because you get to know him, but he can be a little off-putting depending it's more like impatience, or he's not rude or anything like that, but he's a very good actor and very smart man. And anyway, when I was introduced to him, he looked me up and down, like literally head to toe, and was like, "Huh, okay." And then we chatted for a bit. But as soon as I told him I went to Lambda, which was his theater school, he's like, "Oh, okay," and we became friends. And at the end of it, he really loved what I did and introduced me to his manager, and I'm still friends with him. Mike Ironside was on that one, but it was Christopher Plummer, just at the locations with, the honey wagons and hair, makeup, wardrobe. And I think I was walking to the makeup truck, and I see him, maybe he's leaving wardrobe and he's going to his trailer. And of course he's got shorts on and sandals, his orange tan, the white hair, the shirt unbuttoned, the gray hair. And I'm like, man, that's like, I just was speechless. I don't even think I could have gone up and said hi to the guy. I would have loved to work with him though, because he's so, they can be really intimidating, but also the nicest and most giving people as actors in the world. And then of course I get in the trailer to do makeup, and I meet Alec Baldwin, and he's like, "Hey, Alec." And I'm like, "Scott Gibson." He's like, "Yeah, you're playing Tex Wheelis, right?" Like,
Good morning, Lieutenant Wheelis.
Morning, sir. It's time to go, Rags Marshal.
How do I look?
You look fine, sir. How do you feel?
Excited. I've waited many months of silence. Now at last I'm being heard. Shall we?
I'm not allowed to do that, sir.
Oh, yes, of course.
Bring him on.
Like, "You're a surfer dude from Texas."
Wow.
All right.
He knew
And
the
he did
casting
that.
call.
Well, I don't think Tex was from Texas, obviously, but Tex Wheelis, it was kind of obvious, but he was all like, buddy, but then took off. And but definitely Christopher Plummer. It's just so many of them that like F. Murray Abraham, he was Pacino famously quoted saying, if the Oscars were strictly, it was about talent, F. Murray would win it every time. Nicest fucking guy, like just so giving. And I think when those actors, they realize people are going to come into it and be a little intimidated, so they just give them a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to have that in my career and early on working with these people that, it just takes a lot of that away, and you get to just do your thing, and it's brilliant working with them.
You brought up Gregory Hines earlier, and when you said his voice, I haven't thought about it, and said his name, I haven't thought about him ever, and I had this thought, and I'm interested in what you guys think. Do you think Gregory Hines is some of the last representation of golden era Hollywood? I know that the time doesn't line up, but what I mean by that is back in golden era Hollywood, actors had multiple talents. Most of them had to sing, they had to dance, they had to act. And Gregory Hines, I don't know if he was a singer, but he was one hell of a tap dancer, one hell of an actor. I mean, that guy was just a pure ball of talent. And you think nowadays, there's some actors who do sing and act, but you don't see them dance like that anymore.
No,
There's not many triple threats left.
I sat down, had lunch with him. He walked into the set, and Judd Hirsch was there, and I was his assistant DA. So Murray, I call him Mr. Abraham, or call me Murr. Just call me Murr. I always remember him saying that. But I'm sitting beside him, and we're setting up, and in walks Greg, and he's walking down towards us, and he gets right up to me, and he leans in. He's like, "Hey, how you doing, Greg Hines?" He's smiling and shaking. I'm like, "Scott Gibson," and he goes, "Do I know you? Did we work together? You look familiar to me." I'm like, no, we never have. "Oh, okay. Well, nice seeing you." And then at lunchtime, he actually sat in the lunchroom with us, and I don't know if I went to sit beside him, or maybe he said, didn't matter. But anyway, he's like, "Man, are you sure we haven't worked together?" And just that guy up close, his eyes and the love he had in his eyes, like just the pure sort of joy of life and love and knowing yourself. It's so expressive, very underrated as an actor. But he's like, I'm pressing me, and I said, man, I don't think you've seen anything I've done, Greg. And he goes, man, don't say that about yourself. You know, like, you never know. Tell me what you've been in. And I listed off some stuff, and of course he's like, no, never saw any of that.
He seems to me like the human equivalent of a golden Labrador. If you've ever been around a golden lab, you just feel the love radiating off of them. I mean, a golden lab walks in the room, everybody's just like, oh, golden retrievers are wonderful. I mean, they just radiate love and happiness, and that sounds like the way Gregory Hines is when he walks through a room.
So my tap teacher at theater school, this was like a year or two earlier, she went off over the Christmas break or something to do a master class in New York with Greg.
Wow.
And she came back to London, and the first class she came back, you'd have thought she was on cloud 9.5. I mean, she was just like, oh, that man, I am so in love, and what a teacher, So I told him that story, and he's like, oh man, that's great. And then I go, you think, like, I'm 25 now, if I wanted to do, musicals and dance and stuff, you think I could do it? And he's like, no.
Gotta start when you're 5.
Yeah. He goes, you're just too old. Like, he started. And then he said, I started as a kid with my dad and my brother in vaudeville.
Wow.
And so we traveled around, and by the time he was 18, he was in Toronto doing vaudeville. And he goes, man, that's why I got a certain affection for this city. I lost my virginity in Toronto. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, some 25-year-old girl, met her after the show, and we hooked up. And so finish that story. And then I had to ask him about the tribute to Sammy Davis.
Yeah.
Where he does that routine, right? And then he goes down to Sammy, like, it's pre-planned, and Sammy goes underneath the seat and grabs his tap shoes, and he gets on there. And at that age, just saw Sammy pound it out. And then Greg gets down and kisses his feet. And he just, like, he could sort of barely speak about Sammy, his affection for Sammy, everything that Sammy did for Black artists, the industry. And he's like, he just said, Sammy was a god to me. And to listen to him say that about Sammy Davis and have that, like you say, connection to old school Hollywood. But
well, if he was in vaudeville, then he definitely was from golden era. And I just had another thought, never thought about before. Sammy Davis Jr. should get extra credit for his tap dancing skills, because if anybody's ever worn one contact, you don't have no depth perception. The man had one eye. So to do that sort of footwork and those sort of routines with no depth perception, that is fucking amazing.
Yeah, like they, who were the 3 brothers, black dancers? The Johnson, if you can find it, and that connection to them. But the tap was the one, I was okay at the other ones. Tap, I sucked at, because just, I'm like, my ankle and toes have to do 2 different things, like almost at the same time. And the noise, like you say, and I'm just like, forget it.
Were there 2 or 3 of them, of the brothers?
3.
Okay, I found the Nicholas brothers, but that's not them.
Oh, Nicholas, is there just 2?
Yeah, that's Fayward, Fayward and Harold. Fayward, wow, he had a good run. He was born in 1914, passed away in 2006. And then his younger brother was born in 21 and passed away in 2000. So that's
wow. And Greg, I never knew about his father and his brother, but imagine them just hammering it out vaudeville year after year. But I think that must have been just such an exciting time to be a performer. And, okay, I like speak to segregation, but I mean, just to go around and do that for a living, fuck.
And back then, you were contracted to a single movie production house, and they protected your ass. That's where the TMZ, the 30-mile zone, came from.
Yeah. You wouldn't have any of that. Like, how many of those actors back then were gay and having affairs, and you never heard anything. It was all protected. Like, because who cares, right?
Yep.
It doesn't affect. Its sensibilities are so different now, but yeah, man, he was just such a dream. William Hurt was a bit of an odd bird. Robert Hansen, remember that American Spy for the Russians, and so it was a TV movie, and I was later on in the feature film that Chris years later did. Anyway, but he was a bird, like sort of weird and different, but a really good actor. Again, someone just like very giving in the scenes. But that's why I was always surprised about Greg maybe not having more or doing more, because you're hard pressed to meet a more giving actor or performer than Greg Hines. And I loved Running Scared. I told him that. I said, Running Scared with Paul, you and Billy were.
He died young. He died at 57.
Yeah.
It's crazy. The older I get, the younger old gets. When you're 18, 57 seems, he had a good run. Now I'm 46. Like, damn, he died young.
Yeah, I was actually, I remember that, and I was pretty crushed. Really, like, I didn't know him at any point after that. We weren't friends or anything, but just me starting out and him to be so kind and gracious and giving and asking about you,
Mm-hmm.
asking your story, or do we know each other, kind of thing. John Voight.
Yeah,
I met him doing the the Pacific when we were at the Emmys. I don't know, it's funny how they recognize you or something. But I'm walking to the bar, he's walking out in his tux, and he's got his signature white scarf on, and he comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, John Voight." I'm like, "Scott Gibson," and he goes, "Man, do I know you?" And I'm like, no, I don't think you do, but I'm just thinking of all the great movies that he was in, and you're just sitting there staring at him like, sort of blown away. And he's like, "Oh man," I told him I was there for the Pacific and that we'd won. He's like, "Oh, that's fantastic. Congratulations," and everything.
Out of your 70 movie and film credits, which project back in the early days, you jokingly talk about your career, what was the first project that you held to a higher light? Like, okay, this is something, this is a new step in my career. This is a new step, or this is a new level in my acting, resume. What was the first project you said, okay, something's, things are starting to look my way?
The one that just pops to my head, right, is the one I did with Bonnie Bedelia, where I played Terry Helvey, and I forget the name of the movie, but basically stationed in Japan, and he was in the Navy.
Mother's Son, 1997.
Any Mother's Son.
The year I graduated.
Doctor and psychiatrist.
Thank you. Now, you examined the defendant.
Yes, sir, I did.
And what were your conclusions?
Airman Helvey came from a relatively deprived background in which he was subjected to varying degrees of both verbal and physical abuse. On that point, tests reveal a large area of scarring in Airman Helvey's brain. There's a fair association between an individual who's prone to violence and closed head trauma. As well, Airman Helvey's mother used LSD once while she was pregnant with him.
And so she plays the mother of the guy who was killed, and Terry killed her. Terry killed him because he was gay.
Oh, wow.
And true story. And we hadn't really met or associated, and I'm in the witness box and, doing my thing. And just in terms of the way I was playing it, now everything up to that, not knowing me, or we had sort of brief interaction, but when she saw me act, I remember her coming up to me afterwards and saying, "I don't know whether you're a good guy or a bad guy, because like your acting is so good. Like you really got me." And in the scene at the end where she comes into the room where Terry's there, handcuffed to the chair, and it wasn't pre-planned or directed in that way, but she sits down to say some things to me, and I started to cry. But it was a very kind of subtle, and, you know, we finished the scene. She's like, oh my God, I can't, like, she was going to lose it. Like, she was going to cry.
Why? Why did you kill my son? What has he ever done?
Nothing.
And, you know, her from Die Hard, and of course that's not the only thing in her career, you know, just the biggest thing at that time. And I thought, wow, you know, like if I can do that with someone like that, and this is very early on in my career, then I think I got it. I think I got a shot.
So I was going through your IMDb before the show, and of course, you know, you're in a little thing called Pacific, but you've been sleeping on this huge project that I had to go to my closet to get my personal copy of. Unlucky motherfucking number Slevin, sir. You played Slevin's ne'er-do-well, gambling-addicted father in this movie. I'm going to have to mail this to you so you can autograph my copy. I'm like, who did he play? And I'm like pulling up, and I see you. There's a picture of you in that god-awful red leather jacket at the horse track. I'm like, he played his fucking dad. I've seen this movie so many times. I have it on DVD. Don't worry, you're in good company. This was in my shelf. You were in between Deadpool and me, myself, and Irene.
Oh, man. What an honor to be in the middle of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great one. I didn't get to work with Hartnett, obviously, or
Morgan.
The two Morgan.
Well, I was going to ask you that. Was your scene shot by the second DP because it wasn't the main, or, you know, obviously Hardwick and Morgan Freeman weren't in those scenes. So was that a second EP setup, or the first EP they just weren't there that day?
They were done. Everyone was finished, and that part, the last 2 weeks were mine, and that story. So, cut off there. Oh God, who was another great American actor that he played? I'll think of his name. The guy I go to the garage and make the bet with. White, Italian.
I know who you're talking
not
about.
Peter.
I'm trying to find his name.
You didn't get a chance to meet Bruce either, huh?
No.
Dimitri? No, he's Russian. Danny Aiello?
Danny.
Yeah.
So they had him at the bottom of the cast list. That's why I missed him.
He was brilliant. He rolled in because another actor was supposed to do it, but then kind of bailed at the last minute. And he would set up the scene in the garage where I go to make the bed, and he's like, "Oh, I just recently got this, you know, so it's not in there." So he had these cue cards. So we had cue cards on the wall. He had cue cards behind me on the car that's up on the jack.
Mm-hmm.
So in his close-up, he could go to it, and there's this part where it's like, well, you know, if it's 1,000 and you don't pay it, we bust your finger. If it's 5, we bust your hand. If it's 10, it's your arm, or 20. So whatever, how it goes, and then for 20, we defenestrate you. And
I love that word.
Right? Well, he couldn't get it.
He couldn't get defenestrate?
He could not get defenestrate.
Do you know what that means, Morgan? To defenestrate someone?
That is one I'm going to have to look up.
The great thing about the word defenestrate is this happened so much that they had to give it a word. It means to throw someone out a fucking window. Yeah, so
Okay.
it literally, and so in the past, so many people were exited through a window that they had to give it a name.
Defenestrate. And then he's like, you know what that means? We throw you out the window. You live or something, you live, you die or whatever. But he'd stop every time and then he'd be like, fuck. Hey, babe. That's what he called the scripty. Babe, what's that word? Defenestrate. Okay, defenestrate. And then he'd go back into the scene on his he was single on him and single on me. So, and then we cut and everything. And then the director, he said to the director, oh, look, you can cut into this, right? Like you don't need one clean. And the director, forget his name again, Scottish guy, really good. But he goes, well, yeah, I do just need one. Like I really need a clean one. And they did different sizes and all that. That little one scene took us 8 hours.
Mm-hmm. I can believe it. Even if he got the word to finish straight, it'd probably take 6.
Crazy. And so after, but Danny really liked what I was doing. He's like, the kid. Hey, here's the kid, man. The kid is awesome. And then the scene where I get beat up at the end of it, we did that. Like, I think we did 10 takes. Just it was back and forth on a dolly and different size lenses on the scene. And, I was all teared up for it and everything. But in the background is Danny Aiello. So they could have used a double or dummy or whatever. But he's like, no, man, I want to stay. I want to be here. Like, most any other actor, including myself, might have said, okay, he's dead in the background. Do you really need me? But he was a beautiful man, and he became a crooner. And he was a bus driver in New York up until he was in his 40s, and then decided. I think he always told his mom he wanted to be an actor, and his mom at that age said, "Well, listen, you got to go, fulfill this dream."
Wow, at 40, there's hope. You brought up a good point. Danny picked up the project late. He filled in. He stashed cue cards around the set so he could pick up his lines. The one little, what do they call that Kevin Bacon game? The 6 lines of separation.
6 degrees of separation.
So the 1 degree of separation in the acting role between me and Mr. Scott Gibson. You played on Suits. You're on a few episodes with Mr. Patrick J. Adams. I got to. I was an extra on 2 episodes of the remake of The Right Stuff, and Patrick J. Adams was in that. I believe he played Armstrong. And I got to see his method. It's interesting. It's interesting doing it as the background actor because they straight up tell you don't talk to any of the principal actors at all unless they talk to you. But so we're sitting. It was the episode 5. It was New Year's Eve, 1957 for NASA, and so we're all sitting around in our suits. I remember they had I had a 3-piece Ralph Lauren suit done up for me. I remember I showed up for wardrobe. I had to go to Universal Studios. Go in. I actually go into the buildings behind the Rip Roaring Rocket roller coaster into those buildings, and lo and behold, those buildings actually have shit going on. And I walked in there, and the wardrobe lady looks at me. I told them no more tall guys. I'm 6'5". She's like, too many goddamn tall guys. I'm like, fuck. I just drove 2 hours to get here for wardrobe. She's like, don't worry, we'll get you taken care of. But I say all that to bring up this. Everybody has their own method of how they get into the scene, how they memorize their lines. I remember Patrick J. Adams, he would just kind of walk in a circle reading his lines and just kind of pantomiming his movements. What's your method for when you're trying to either get into a certain mind state or maybe on the Pacific when you guys are doing a scene at Peleliu and you just got done running across the airport and you're talking to Sledge about, different things. How do you get into a particular mindset? Do you have a method? Do you pace in circles? Do you just go off by yourself and think of something horrible that happened in your past? How do you get in particular mindstates when you're getting ready to cut a scene?
I really try and connect with the people I'm working with. So whether that's, I don't like to rehearse so much as if people just want to rehearse so that they know they have the lines, it's just sort of dead to me. It doesn't mean anything. I really don't want to do it. I've told some actors that, and they joke with me, but I'm like, I'd rather not, because we're going to do it 17 times, 20 times. and it's just going to get dull. And, but if you have a rapport with them and kind of get to know them, just a little something about them that you connect with and find a way to connect with them, then that kind of takes a lot of that nervousness away. Like there's always a little bit of nervousness, which is good. And obviously knowing what you're talking about, but I would just try and relate always to that person right across from me, get into their eyes, get into their character, what they're giving me, and try and forget about the lines as much as possible, just so that it felt, and I, don't deliver them the same way. Because that's what I found sort of earlier on in my career is that, you think too much about the lines, you're just going to say them the same way. And then ultimately you're going to forget what you're saying, or you're going to mess it up if you don't focus on that. And you just think about, okay, that takes over this one, what is the moment? What is the action of the scene that I'm in? Because it's all about the action, right? Like what you're doing. And you get into that kind of rhythm, it makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Do you find in most of the projects you've worked on, is the script supervisor super strict, or do they often let you walk and ad-lib a little bit more, or improv more?
Certainly now, like the TV movies I do so much pre-editing because some of them are so bad, or the Hallmark ones. Back in the day, or the bigger shows, like they want, it actually suits, funny enough, script coordinator, hey, Scripty, she came up to me, it's like, yeah, in that last take you forgot to say I. I'm like, this, or was, or something, or if, it was like a preposition. And I just looked at her and like, she goes, I know, but the producers are really picky. So who the hell want you to put that in your mind and then you're just thinking about it, right? Like, and so they'd be very particular. Or the Pacific, even, there was some stuff that Tom Hanks wrote and it just didn't gel with me. And I'm talking to Tim Van Patten to see, hey, do you think we could edit this or change it? And I don't know what, I didn't know Tom wrote it, but it just didn't, I don't know, there's something that wasn't colloquial, or it was actually that scene in the rain where I go up and ask for stretcher bearers. Mm-hmm. And something just wasn't, I don't know, it seemed a little too forced. But then, of course, Tony Toe was like, any
other day but today.
Yeah, maybe Bruce's or one of the other writers, but not Tom. Not Tom. But I didn't know that they'd had that discussion. Apparently they did. And
because they felt the same way.
Yeah. I met Tom at the 10-year anniversary for Band of Brothers. They invited us there, and that was in 2010. And when I met him, it was weird because I didn't really hit it off with him. But he'd written me a letter for my visa. And he did, he okayed what his assistant wrote. That's how it all works, right? Funny, Spielberg stopped after Band of Brothers signing those letters, those visa letters.
Yeah, it seemed to me, not that I know, I have no way to know, but it seemed to me, but by the time the Pacific rolled around, Spielberg was just more kind of a money man, name on the project type deal, or was he actually more involved than that?
Yeah, he was more involved. He was prepping Indiana Jones.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't want to travel to Australia. He didn't want to direct one, but certainly, yeah, all the structure, the narrative, the casting. He was in on all that. One of his favorite moments, Tony told me, was my Tiananmen Square moment with the Amtrak. he really dug that. But once we got into it, he didn't have a part of it. But they sent dailies back to Tom in LA every single day, and he'd have notes every single day, and he'd write, he'd edit scripts. Like he edited one of Bruce's scripts, and Bruce is telling me, he's like, man, the guy, like, he didn't just scratch out a few lines here and there. He scratched out 20 pages.
Talk about a rewrite.
Yeah. And Bruce is, he had a few, and he's like, fuck, like, tell that in any interview you do. And I'm going, yeah, like, I'm going to say that about Tom Hanks, that he edited your script out, like your bank account could afford that way more than mine.
14 years later, here he is on a no-name podcast dropping the juice.
it just happens. It just happens, right? That kind of stuff all the time.
I've never done any, TV or movies, but back in my younger days, I did do theater. So how much, you said you don't like to rehearse, but how much rehearsal is there to set blocking and stuff like that before you actually start doing takes?
For the bigger stuff, there's quite a bit, and maybe more so again, like back in the day. But like the Pacific, for instance, is 35 millimeters, so all the execution of the explosions and movement and everything like took a really long time. When it came to just doing dialogue, we were so set in what we were doing and good with what we were doing that once you sunk into it, sat down, it just flowed. Like there were very, very few issues at all like that because, you're spending so much time together. But obviously the bigger setups, sometimes just some directors they don't really want to rehearse the crap out of it, but they want to shoot the crap out of it. 3 cameras and change all the lenses, and that drives me mental because you're just going like, why do you need so much? But that changed over the years where editors became, okay, give me more. They always want more takes.
Yeah, because now that shit's digital, it doesn't cost them money other than time and labor. Back when you're talking about when you worked with Gregory Hines and all them back shooting in the 90s, a lot of that shit was filmed. And so it made more sense that you would have stage actors, because when you're doing a live show on Broadway, you can't say, cut, let me reshoot that. And so it made sense, especially when your medium was film and the shit cost money. It made perfect sense to have people who had a background in live acting versus nowadays it's all high quality digital and you're just burning through SD cards.
You don't really need the training, I guess. So much is camera and lighting and digital and remastering and coloring afterwards and all that kind of shit. We're back in the day. It's like, hey man, you got to hit the mark and bark because this is on 35 and we're about to hit. We can't hit overtime, and there was pressure.
Yeah,
and a lot of the things. Like I went out for a lot of big things that I obviously never got. One of the biggest was a Star Trek movie. Character of Shins on. I forget the title of which one it was, but it was playing Picard's son. Was the bad guy.
Wow.
And ultimately, that went to Tom Hardy. But I auditioned for that in Toronto. And the U.S. casting director said I was the best guy that she saw out of Canada. And I had a really good British accent at the time. So it's like you do something like that and you think, how different would your career be? I mean, certainly a lot of blessings, and particularly from the Pacific, but you do something that big in a feature, you're off, right? You do a series, last 5 years or more, you're set. It's not like that anymore. And then with the streaming, they don't do pilots. They just buy the series.
Yeah, because there's such a hunger for content, right? Because there's so many streaming services. My wife keeps saying, well, let's cancel Netflix. All their new shows are overdubbed and from overseas. Why can't they get American shows? I'm like, because back when Netflix started, you had all these production houses who weren't streaming. So they were dying to sell that property over to Netflix to get that money. Now they're like, we can make more money by starting our own streaming service. And so now the projects that Netflix has access to are gone because Paramount streaming, CBS, everybody and their grandmother who made movies in the past all have their own streaming services. And so now people are dying for content. Good news is there's more projects out there for actors to participate in. But like you were saying, now you don't get quite that spotlight. It's kind of reminiscent of the first season, like the first 2 seasons of reality TV. Remember the first cast and crew of Survivor. A lot of those cats went on to do movies and this and that. 20 years in later, I was in Survivor season 83. Okay, I don't know who you are. You could be a YouTuber for all I care. And it's kind of the same way now. Did you have a stand-in on Pacific, or did they make you block your shots?
I think there were. I don't ever remember having anyone stand in unless I had to. You're late getting there, or Dale Dye actually stood in for me.
Yeah, I remember that.
But no, man, we just sat in those holes or wherever we were and chewed the fat, and that's also what helped to maintain the character as well. Not that we were talking about the war per se or anything, but no, they were like, you guys, sorry.
You were talking about reshoots and how annoying they are. I remember, when I did The Right Stuff, the biggest project I ever did, I've gone it, I never sat in on any sort of large scale production. The only other production I was on was the one Jeff did, which was Walking Point, which is a very small production, which was still cool. But I had no idea, and I don't know if they all do this, but this was Leonardo DiCaprio was the executive producer on this. They had us reshoot each scene like 4 times. They had to change the camera angle. So shoot it once, change the camera angle. Shoot it again, change the camera angle. Shoot it again, change the camera angle. And then because they hadn't decided where the project was going, it was originally meant to be shown on the Smithsonian Network on cable TV. But I guess they were in works with putting it on Disney, where it eventually went. We had to shoot any scene that involved smoking twice. One where we were smoking for the Smithsonian Network, and 2 where the cigarettes never touched our mouths for the Disney Channel. So when you go watch it now, you'll see the people with the cigarettes. You won't actually see them actively smoking because the Disney Channel didn't want, even though they have the historical smoking at the beginning. We actually had to shoot like the bar scene I'm in, because the first episode I'm in, I'm in a Navy uniform at a naval retirement, and then I can't remember which one of the astronauts came in. He comes in and has an argument with his higher up, talking about he needs more flight time because he's a test pilot. Perfect for me as the background actor, because when you're watching this scene, you got one actor here, you got the other actor here. There's my tall ass right in between them in the background, doing my pantomiming with the 2 other people, and I'm wearing a naval officer's uniform. And you're talking about how Gregory Hines came up to you and introduced himself, and then at lunch he came talk to you, and it makes you feel good, right? It's like, wow, he came back and found me and talked to me.
Yeah.
I had a similar issue. I was standing around before we shoot, and the second DP walks up, and he's like, did you serve? I'm like, no, I'm a World War II reenactor. This is what I do. I make uniforms look good. That's what I do on the weekends. And I'm in the air conditioning instead of the hot Florida sun, so it's even better. He's like, World War II reenacting? I didn't know that was a thing. I've heard of Civil War reenacting. I'm like, yeah. He's like, I want to talk to you about that later. And he walks on. He's just being nice. Motherfucker, if I wasn't sitting at lunch, he came over and found me, and we sat there and talked for 10, 15 minutes, and he got left like, I'm just a no-name computer guy, and here the DP comes tracking me down, talking to me more during lunch. I was like, it just makes you feel so damn good. But
oh yeah.
But yeah, shooting that stuff 2 or 3 times from every different angle. And then like we're going to lunch, wardrobe lady comes up, snaps a picture of you to make sure you got the same exact glasses, because it's 1950s. We all have like the horn glasses and the haircut and all that, and the fake cigarettes. I actually stole my pack of fake cigarettes. One thing I had walked away from that set is I have my fake cigarettes. And it was so cool because they shot this at a country club at a golf course in the middle of downtown Orlando. And this set production comes in and all the modern day crap comes down, and this is like 1956. And so they putting up old World War II photos and 1950 era sconces. And they actually had cocktail napkins printed up. This had the Navy logo and it said Officers Club. They never really shot, but they had them sitting on the table. So I have one of those as well. But yeah, I never realized how much work it goes into shooting one scene. I mean, we did, for that one scene at that country club, we were there for about 7 hours shooting that one scene, because it was every angle plus smoking and the non-smoking. And it just makes you realize how much work, because we all say, acting's an easy gig. I wish, if you don't like working an 8-hour day, you're not going to like acting, because that's a hell of a lot longer than an 8-hour day. And it's a lot. It's similar to the military in the fact that it's a whole hell of a lot of hurry up and wait. Because as you're saying, you got to reset the scene. You got to put that coffee mug exactly where it was. You got to put all the actors, all the extras back where they were. And it makes for a long day.
Yeah, man. And these TV movies like the ones I do up here, and it's, again, a blessing to be working. So, okay, yeah, now my situation doing Lifetime movies or the Hallmark movies, but they shoot them like in 12 days. So if you got one of the bigger characters, like you're on set for like 12 hours, and the other company sometimes will do 14. One of them's hard 12, others 14. And I've done like, I don't know, 15, 20 pages. So back in the day on a movie or something like, particular feature, you might get 3, 4 pages, 5 pages, but that'd be it. And so it's less money, more time, and more work. And you got to look like you're not tired or pissed off or whatever, right? And you got to do it over and over again. It ain't easy.
One of my friends from back in the day, he found out I was doing some background work. He private messaged me, and I forget the name of the policy. You probably know it. It's named after somebody that's like Harvey Smoot or something. He's like, when you go to check in, tell them you want the Harvey Smoot or whatever the hell it is. I'm like, what the hell is that? He's like, the way it works, the Screen Actors Guild, is they have to pay X amount of money in union payroll per project per day. And if there's not enough union actors, the percentage-wise, to fill that percentage, then they have to give non-union actors union wages until they meet that percentage. I was like, good to know. So went in there and told him, and he said he would look into it, but I can't remember if I did. But yeah, it's like that's something you don't know about, but that's good to know if especially on a project that big where you have that many extras. I mean, you got hundreds of extras filling up this room for this this New Year's Eve scene. That adjusts that percentage greatly. And so when you have a shit ton of non-union actors, background workers there, you have a higher likelihood of getting that extra bump in pay. But it was a good time. It's interesting. You're talking about how acting's changed, and we'll wrap up here shortly, but I want to get to this. You're talking about when you first started, it was headshots, VHS tapes, and a lot of in-person casting calls. But with COVID, COVID made one thing nice, and that is pre-COVID, when you're doing podcasts and stuff, and I was actually doing video podcasts like this way before COVID, just because the people I'm interviewing are from all around the world. But it was kind of considered low budget. But since COVID, it's perfectly acceptable to do Zoom calls and all that, because that's just, you had Fox News doing it and all these huge productions. They had no choice. I know it's probably more acceptable now to do, they actually prefer video casting now, opposed to, at least for the first 1 or 2, right? Has that changed dramatically?
Yeah. I mean, it got cheaper for them. They necessarily don't have to see as many people. So that dropped their cost. And anything other than, I think, a really bigger project, or, if like a director wanted to meet you, but I haven't been in the room in years.
It kind of makes sense though, because if you're filming a TV show or a movie, when you're doing a video casting, they're actually getting what you look like on film or on a TV screen, opposed to in real life, and then doing the mental conversion in their head. Well, because obviously it's different when someone's in front of you versus in the format they're going to be seen on, whether it's movie or TV.
Yeah, and if you know what you're doing and you got some chops, I mean, you can do it all night and just take the best takes and send it to them. Hopefully you can recreate that on set, because particularly if it's a day player role, you don't get the sort of love that the other people do or the time, and they just expect you to come in and you're a professional and you nail it. They're not mean or anything, but with the Mayor of Kingstown I did, and with Renner, they wouldn't give me the script ahead of time.
I was going to ask you about that, because Carrie and I are currently watching that season, and you're on like season 1, episode 2 and 4, or 1 and 3?
Yeah, 2 and 4, and they wouldn't give me a script ahead of time.
What character?
So
what role were you playing?
I was an FBI agent, but what I didn't know was that, so Kyle, you've seen it?
Yeah, I'm up to date. I just got done watching. It comes out every Sunday, so we're actively watching it. The season finale just hit on Friday or last Sunday.
Well, I had no idea in this scene that I had to audition with that Kyle Chandler gets killed.
Mm-hmm.
That he was an informant for the FBI. That I was going in to meet Jeremy Renner and have this talk with him. That okay, well, why don't you be our guy now? And right, and a little heated discussion. I had no fucking idea, and I had to go in on set, and people weren't talking about it. The girl I work with, she had the script, and she's whispering to me what's going on. I'm like, why are you whispering? We're here filming. Like, no, everyone knows what's going on. Like, you're not going against your NDA, you know? And then you get on set and do it. And I thought, okay, well, at least I'll have a chance. They're going to start on Renner and then on me. So I'll get into the scene and then I'll kind of know what we're doing. We set it up, rehearse. There's no cameras in the room. You leave, they set up, I come back. There's 3 cameras staring at me. And I just went, fuck, okay. Well, here goes kind of thing. And man, I was fucking that up. Now, you wouldn't know it from the final edit, like you got it. But, I was able to pull it off. But I thought, why the fuck wouldn't you tell your actors what they're doing? And this is not my first rodeo.
Yeah.
And, but just this new way of doing things, and it's a bigger thing, and it's Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it was Taylor Sheridan, and because all the popularity of Yellowstone, if they're afraid that like shit would leak out.
Yeah, it's bullshit. It's complete bullshit. More control. But I expected better from Taylor and the people that produced this thing. I'm in the scene, so I should know what's going on. As the character, do you want me to be the character, or do you want me to be someone who signed a fucking NDA?
Yeah.
Like I should know what I'm saying, don't you think? Jeremy does. Everyone else, your lead actors do, but not the day players. And some other guy that came in one of the other days on the episode, and he's like, "Yeah, this is my one and only day," and I go, "No, it's not." And he goes, "Oh yeah, no, my agent told me it's one day," and I go, "No, dude, you kill me." And he goes, "What?" And I'm like, yeah, because a props person told me the whole storyline. The props was like, "Oh, dude, I'll tell you. It told me everything." And I said, he's an FBI agent gone rogue. And I said, man, you're the guy that comes in and kills me in this other episode. Have you shot that yet? And he goes, "No, I didn't even know about it." And I said, "Well, you got another day." But you never would have had that. I used to get scripts when you audition.
Yeah.
So you'd know what the fuck you're saying. Now you just get sides. So it can be real hit or miss on the choices you make if you don't really know what's going on. But they don't care. They just want to see the face and how tall are you, what color are you, all this stuff that plays into it. Where before, I know it opened up opportunities, and I'm happy that it did. But now it's so much more about what you look like,
to that
what you
point.
Sound like.
I still get casting calls from the casting agency I'm with, but since we're here in Florida, a lot of it's Disney productions. And the last one I got last week, they're looking for a family of 4 who were fluent in Spanish, but they were looking for I think they were looking for, not Brazilian, they were looking for, oh fuck, I completely went blank on it. But they were looking for a very specific Spanish orientation. And then another one I got one time, they wanted a family of 4 mixed race. I'm like, well, cool. We adopted a Hispanic daughter, but I'm like, well, Carrie's blonde hair, blue eyes, I'm white. They're not gonna be interested in our family. So it's definitely no. It's definitely changed a lot. Before we go, I know Morgan, you had a couple more questions you wanted to throw out there.
Well, So the first one is, if you could pick somebody to work with, like just anybody, who would be like your dream, co-star?
Alive?
Yes.
Oh man. You know who pops to mind is Meryl Streep. Just so giving, like unbelievably giving actress, and obviously super talented. And because I mean, a lot of my stuff I find I just do better when it's more intimate. The scenes, like the bigger stuff that they shoot, you can get away with shit, and they don't really use that many masters anyways nowadays, right? Because all the editing and everything. But having someone like that, just on, if it's just you and them banging it out, that's sort of the highlight of the day, or the highlight of acting, when you can just connect with someone like that. And all the guys in the Pacific, I have to say, there wasn't any time you looked at someone and went, geez, that guy's no good, or he's not pulling his weight, or whatever. Not even so much that, but the brilliant thing one of the key things I think about both those series was the casting. Like, yeah. They nailed it, man. It's so nailed it on both those things. And, but yeah, I'd say no.
Go ahead, Morgan.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
It's crazy. I forget his name. The gentleman who played in Fury, but he was also in the Pacific. He was one of Baz Luhrmann's buddies who got killed running the 30 cal ammo.
John Bernthal.
Yeah, and prior to that, I mean, that was that pre Walking Dead or mid Walking Dead? I can't remember. Walking Dead's been around so goddamn long. I can't remember when it came out.
It was before Walking Dead.
Yeah,
but he was up for Barcelona and didn't get it, obviously. But the guy who played Barcelona, they had cast. He got fired the first day on boot camp, and they had Seda there as Rodriguez, and so they asked Seda, hey man, you want to stick around for 10 months and play John Barcelona? So he phoned his family, phoned his wife, like, yeah, okay. Like, they actually gave him a cell phone at boot camp in Australia, in the middle of this rainforest, and he called up his wife.
Luckily he knew her number.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the guy who just got fired is sitting in a van waiting for another van to come pick him up, because we were remote where this boot camp was. It was far away from where the location. So, and then they called up John and, hey, you want to come do and play this? And John was the first big hire for Walking Dead. They cast him first. And then the guy who got the lead.
I just wish The Walking Dead would have had a better firearms technician on site.
Oh, really?
Very first episode, they got the roadblock set up, right? And you got Seda and the main star. You got the roadblock. And then they have some nobody actor who's playing the dopey deputy. He's like, deputy, make sure your safety's off. He's holding a fucking Glock. Glocks don't have manual safety. So they show him hitting a button, which in real life is the magazine release. It's like, no. If you guys are so die hard about this safety button, give him a fucking revolver. And then I remember in like later seasons, that guys are shooting ARs with like no rear sight. They just have like a front sight on it. It's just the firearms, like the whoever was there.
The technical advisor.
The technical advisor for the firearms. The only thing worse than that is the very last episode of Sons of Anarchy. Jack pulls out his Glock, goes to put up behind his mom's head. And post-production, the sound guy puts in the sound of a hammer cocking like it's a 38. It's like, it's a slide. There is no cocking sound on a fucking Glock. That's the thing that drives me nuts about these cop TV shows, right? You watch a cop TV show, you would just think every cop's walking around with an unloaded gun. Because every episode, they pull the gun out and they load the chamber. It's like, no, you walk around, even a civilian. I carry daily. I got a concealed carry permit. If you're going to carry a gun without a round in the chamber, leave it at home. Because legally, you can't pull that firearm unless your life is in danger. And you can't tell the guy with the knife or the gun, hold on, okay, let's go. No. If you're going to carry a firearm with a gun with a round not in the chamber, don't carry it. And look, I get it. If you're new to firearms, like, well, what if I drop it? What if it falls? And I kind of felt that way too until I started World War II reenacting. And I got to thinking logically. It's like I'm running, jumping, diving, ducking, rolling with an 85-year-old rifle loaded, and I never had a misfire with a blank. I got a piece of shit Italian stamped out fake 1911 that I bought for $150 off some website with 9mm blanks loaded in it. That thing's never gone off. So if my cheap stamped out $150 blank firing gun or my 80-year-old rifle doesn't misfire, I doubt my modern day Glock is going to have a misfire carrying it in my truck while I'm sitting in my nice cushy leather seat. And so the point is there's no...
Yeah, I can't tell you.
Go ahead, Morgan.
I can't tell you how many times I dropped my M16 and nothing bad happened.
I will say this because I watched an episode of Grantham today. He did drop test on firearms. The only ones that fired were the 1211s now. They're not 1911s. They're like 1611s. They're in the modern day. And the hammers weren't going off. What was happening when you drop them on the barrel? The inertia would cause a firing pin, and he would put blanks in them. So the only ones that did were like the newer 1911s would misfire when you dropped them on their barrels on concrete with the safety off. But yeah. So yeah, Walking Dead and the last episode of Sons of Anarchy are the two that really stick in my craw and bad firearm knowledge. It's like there's no Glock hammers. Have you ever had to do like post-production pickup lines?
Oh yeah.
How is that hard to get back into that mind state 3 months later, sitting in an air-conditioned sound booth versus being out on the field in uniform or in wardrobe?
Yeah, I mean, so many times I never think that production sounds that bad. I feel like someone's job is being justified. I'm not kidding, because it's like, seriously, I you're listening, you're going, I don't hear a fucking thing. And I mean, that sounds, yeah, but there's a little, and you're going, is there though? Like, is there?
Well, I will, not to stand up for the sound guy, I will say this. I did work terrestrial radio as an afternoon show producer for 6 years. And to this day, sadly, they just announced a retirement, but to this day, and I could even do this on my podcast, my brother would do this a lot. I'll listen to the radio and I can hear the sound of a mouse moving, or like I know when Stan's picking up a pen just from listening through a microphone and earphone for 4 hours a day for 6 years. And the sound guy's the same way. You'll notice things that someone who's never done it before, like, oh yeah, that's Stan. He just hit the scroller wheel on his mouse, or Haney just moved his cup 3 inches to the left. I can pick up on that stuff because I've been editing audio and doing podcast and radio for the last 10 years. So a sound guy might actually hear that sound that you don't pick up on just because they've trained themselves to hear it.
Are you talking while you're filming or post?
I hear it live. Like one day we were doing a podcast and one of my brothers on it, and I was like, dude, stop scrolling your mouse wheel. He's like, you can hear it? I was like, yeah, I can hear it. Just because I'm so attuned to,
Yeah.
And I go,
the HBO, like, they didn't, all our ADR was included. And it was hours and hours of ADR.
Included in your salary?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like days and days. They flew me to LA at least twice. They did a bunch in Australia. You can imagine how much the lead guys had to do. And the woman doing it, lovely enough, but she annoyed me because okay, you get it. And it's like, okay, that's perfect. Okay, now one more for safety. Well, if you're got to run, or you're doing something with the weapon or anything like that, right? And then you're trying to match it. It's like a bit of a gamble, and you're going, okay, so you have production and you have this perfect one, and now you want another perfect one. I said, fuck, I'll be here. And I remember in Australia, and I was sick, so my voice was starting to go, and then and halfway through the first day of doing it, I just said, okay, I'm done. I can't. And I had to go square my head already. Like, how am I going to work with this woman?
Could you see yourself doing full-time voiceover work?
Voiceover?
Yeah. Could you see yourself doing that? Because I'll tell you right now, I think Netflix is hurting because, as I was saying before, a lot of their shows are overdubbed, and I think they use the same 5 voiceover actors. And it's not the overdub that drives me nuts. It's the voice actors they're using. Their energy doesn't match the scene. So that, to me, that's worse.
Yeah.
Like Squid Game. Squid Game is a huge show, but if you're listening, a lot of times that dialogue does not match the scene. And there was a couple other shows Karen and I watched that came out, like Holland or whatever. There was one that was about a bunch of mobsters or staying at like a campground and some shit was going on. And it's like, yeah, the excitement in their voice doesn't match what's going on in the scene. And I think maybe Netflix has their own in-house group of voiceover artists that does that shit. And I'm thinking, yeah, you guys need to expand your cast because
that are probably non-union and
probably,
getting paid fuck all.
Yeah, I made a cool $12 an hour doing doing the right stuff because I was non-union. But hey, $125 a day to sit around and play pretend for somebody like me is like, hey, fuck it, beats the day of working on computers. Well, Scott Gibson, thank you so much for hanging out with us for a little bit. We want to remind each and every one of y'all who are listening, please head over to what'sinyourhead.com, click on that Patreon link, sign up and subscribe. Speaking of Scott Gibson, right now, if you're a member of Patreon, you get to watch full color video, including some snap-in covers from Scott's last appearance on the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. We have a few clips for free on YouTube, but if you want to see that full interview, go sign up for Patreon. It only costs you $1 a month. And I just recently uploaded Henry Sledge's first appearance on the show, where he's actually showing you his father's 1911 and then his haversack and his HBT cap and all the super nerdy World War II stuff that you may want to see. So head over to patreon.com, sign up and subscribe. You'll get access to that. And while you're there, head over to youtube.com, look for D410 Media, and like and subscribe and get all of our content. For myself, Mr. Scott Gibson, Morgan Long, and Mike, no use for last name, who'll be back next week. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you around.
This has been a Digital 410 production. This has been a Digital 410 production.